Gilliland with As You Wish Talk Radio, broadcasting live from the ECETI Ranch, other known as Paranormal and UFO Central. We've got some crazy weather going on here. We have a thunderstorm, so hopefully we'll stay on the air. We've got a little bit of rain, and might get a little crazy later, but who knows. We took some amazing footage just the other day of the mountain doing some strange things, so we'll have that up on YouTube. But it looked like lightning, but it was coming from the ground, and the mountain was lighting up, and there was nothing, anywhere around, not one cloud, nothing. It wasn't heat lightning. It was coming from the ground up, and the whole mountain was just throwing off tremendous bursts of energy. And it was the same time these coronal mass ejections have been hitting. So we've had some about 3-4 major coronal mass ejections, one after another, hitting the Earth, or solar flares, some people call them. But it's going to be a little crazy. So those affect the bioelectric fields around the human body. They create emotional outbursts, make people do crazy things. So kind of pay attention to your surroundings and realize you're not alone, that we are going through some shifts. But it also creates increase in earthquake and volcanic activity, which we are seeing on the planet right now. We're seeing a lot of quakes and some new volcanoes going off. So this is going to escalate right up to 2012, so hang on to your hats. If you think this isn't going to affect you, and you have a physical body, guess what? You're on the same ride we're on. But anyway, I've got a great show tonight. I've got Mel Fabregas on the show, and Mel did the honor of coming up to see us, and got to see us here at ECETI and meet some pretty amazing people. We had quite a lineup during the ECETI conference. So without any further ado, I wanted to bring Mel on the show. Mel, are you with us?
I'm with you. What a pleasure being with you, James. Hi.
Hey, thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
I've got a couple of questions for you, just to start out with. You've got the Veritas show, and we've got your link up there to the show. But how did you get into the broadcasting?
That's a very good question. And just to let everybody know, it's very difficult for me sometimes to switch my interviewer hat, my interviewee hat. So I'm still practicing and learning, so bear with me here. But that's a great question. I have absolutely no journalism, no broadcasting experience. I had never interviewed anybody in my entire life. However, a few, let's call them paranormal, or things that I cannot understand, happened to me many years ago. We can talk about them later if you'd like. But basically in, I would say, early December, late November 2008, I had a dream. And the dream basically said, take action, take action. So I woke up in the morning, and the thought kept going, take action. And I hardly watch the subliminal tube. Those who listen to my show know I hardly watch any TV. But that day I decided to turn on the TV, and as I'm channel surfing, all I could see was Milton Torres. And those who listen to you may know who Milton Torres was. He was an Air Force pilot who in the 1950s was ordered to shoot down a UFO. So here I am, surfing the TV, CNN, Fox, everybody had them on. And nobody would ask any questions. Would have them on for about 2 minutes and let them go. And I thought to myself, maybe take action means that I need to interview this man. So in less than 10 minutes, I found his telephone number. And I said to myself, well, I can't just call him and say I'm Mel and I'd like to talk to you about what happened to you in the 50s. So as my wife is walking by, I said, hey, what kind of a name can I use for a possible show that had to do with everything that I talk about? And she just uttered the word Veritas. So I called Dr. Torres, and I told him that I was from the Veritas show, and asked him for an interview. The next day I recorded the interview, which was mainly a souvenir for me, because I wanted to hear more of the story, and I uploaded it to a couple of internet forums. In less than 24 hours, I was flooded by email. The hits were in the thousands, and people were asking, when is the next show going to happen? So at the time, Stephen Bassett emails me as well, and most of you listeners know who Stephen Bassett is. So I decided to talk to him, and he said, can I please have Milton Torres' information because I'd like to have him on in the X conference. So I said, yes, if you please have an interview with me. And he said, absolutely. So that's how the Veritas show started. I don't know how the style, how the whole show evolved. It has been a matter of osmosis, talking to all the individuals, you and everybody else. And that's how it happened. I had no experience whatsoever. I always had, James, an overly developed sense of wonder. I was the kid in school that some of the teachers hated. I went to a Catholic school all my life where certain questions were not allowed. Any paranormal questions were frowned upon. So I was that kind of kid, and I was always told not to ask certain questions. And once I matured and became older, I decided that it was time for me to explore all these things. So that's where I am now.
Is there any way you can move a little bit away from the mic? We're over-modulating, so.
What's this?
That's better. Yeah, it's
okay.
Sounds good. Yeah, that sounds awesome. It's amazing what I've seen is some of the most famous people in broadcasting and things like that just, woke up one day and just had a dream or had a vision, and they went after it. And I was the same way. I when I wrote the books, I was told some things in spirit. I don't even want to say what they are. They were so outrageous. I laughed. I thought they were really funny. They told me what I would be doing, and I just said, yeah, right, and I go, that's crazy, and now I'm doing all the things that they told me about, quite a while ago. So, it's just a matter of doing it, just getting out there, doing it, give it your best shot, and just, I would say launch your boat and make course corrections as you go.
Exactly. Most of our life is it's like an airplane. If you're a pilot and you go from, say, L.A. to Hawaii, you'll spend probably 80% of your time trying to get back on track, because otherwise you get lost. But I remember having you on my show and you telling me all the stories growing up, and I have a few of those stories if you'd like to hear them.
Sure, I'd love to hear them.
Well, when I was about 7, that was the very first time where I knew that something was different with me. I was about 7. I had a crush, my very first crush in school of this little girl, and I came home, and I had a dream that night again, and the dream basically said, next day you're going to be walking after school to a house. So I came home from school that day, and I decided to start walking, probably about a mile or 2 miles, and that's during the time when you could walk far away from home without having any fear, as you wouldn't allow your 15-year-old kid today to take the bus. But here I am walking about 2 miles, and I go directly to this house that I've never been to. And there's this big German Shepherd approaching me, and a lady comes out and says, son, are you lost? And I said, no, I'm looking for, let's call her Mary. That's not her name. And she says, sure, let me get her for you. And then Mary, who was this girl from my school, comes out, and she says, what's happening to you? Are you lost? Why are you here? At the time, I was so embarrassed that I couldn't explain how I got there, that I just decided to walk back home. And all the way home, I was wondering, how in the world did I find out where her house was? So that's another story. Years later, I moved to Miami, Florida in 1991, a year before Hurricane Andrew. That's when I left. At 11:30 p.m. every night, the house alarm, the security alarm would go off. And I've had this conversation with Colin Andrews, who you may know, who had a similar story to tell. But at 11:30 every night, I would go downstairs running, and the alarm panel would say that something was happening or vibrating in my room upstairs. So I decided to yank the alarm and just turn it off completely. Well, the next day, instead of the alarm, I hear a bing, as if somebody with a piece of metal hit the stairway rail. So I jump from bed, and I'm saying, no, please, that's not possible. So I touched the railing, and it was vibrating. Okay? Then Hurricane Andrew comes along. I moved, my company sends me to Mexico City. I'm there at a hotel for a month. Nothing happens. But then I moved to an apartment. And then the first night, I'm sleeping. At 11:30 p.m., I feel so cold that I look to the window, and the window is open and the curtain's flapping. And I said, oh, maybe I just left the windows open. So I locked the windows, piece of big metal. The next day I made sure that it was closed. 11:30 p.m., the window opens again. So at that time, I just felt I was going crazy. I could not explain. I mean, anything paranormal I could not explain. So the next day I go to the office. I'm hiring people. And this lady comes along. And people who listen to my show know when I refer to the witch lady. This lady looked like a witch. Makeup, long nails, etc. So I decided to hire her on the spot. I don't know why. She made me feel very comfortable. And she asked me, sir, are you okay? And I usually never tell strangers what's happening with me. So I told her the story, the 11:30 p.m. thing. And she says, well, do you mind if I borrow your pen, your pocket pen, and I'll bring it in the morning? She brought it back in the morning and started telling me things about my past that nobody knew but me. And she said, somebody is trying to communicate with you, and you're blocking it. You need to learn how to meditate. And this is probably almost 20 years ago, and I still have not learned to meditate. I always fall asleep. So hanging out with people like you, James, maybe I'll excel to it. So a few months later, almost a year later, she comes to the office. We became friends, and she said she came crying. And she says, I'm crying because you're leaving. And I said, why? I'm so happy here in Mexico City. Things are great. Well, a couple of days later, the economy crashed there. And my former boss called me, and she had told me, you're going to get a phone call from somebody and you're going to leave. The next day I come to the office, and she says, you got your phone call, didn't you? So then she started telling me things about my future. She said, you're going to move to a place that's very warm, has a lot of nature, and you're going to marry somebody that looks like this. You're going to have, X number of kids, and most importantly, one day you'll be doing something. You're going to be informing the world. And I said, wait a minute. I can't understand everything. She even said that I next of kin was going to die. My dad died the year later. I married somebody that, exactly how she described, but I could never understand the informing the world part. So now I know. And she said, one day you'll know, and in due time it will be revealed to you. And this is how all the transition that I'm going through. That's why, James, when I met Lisa Renee, I had a ton of impact because she had her Kundalini. I've never had a Kundalini. I didn't even know what Kundalini meant. But we were both in the corporate world. Something triggered in our brain. A switch was turned on, and this is where we are today.
Great. Yeah, there's so many stories. I mean, it sounds like my story, basically. It's very similar. I was doing commercial real estate and had my own office and people working for me, and then I had a little different experience. I had a drowning, and that kicked everything on. And from there on, I was intently, on a spiritual journey. But it sounds amazing. Do you still have contact with this woman that you're saying looks like a witch? Or
Funny that you ask. No, I do not. And not because I don't want to have contacts, because for years I've been wanting to talk to her again. But the moment I left Mexico City, I moved to Northern California. The first thing I did was call the office to say hello to her. And they said, well, Amalia, that was her name, never came back after you left. So I said, okay, fine, I'll call her at home. Her phone was disconnected. It's almost as if she was there for a mission. Maybe to have, some people say maybe she wasn't even from here. Well, look,